Thank you, Danielle. It is time for the headliner presented by Miller Lite. Our guest is longtime NHL executive, league executive. I mean, I could go on, USA Hockey, and currently an analyst for Sportsnet. Man that truly does not need an introduction, as I say a lot on this show, but it is Brian Burke. Brian, thanks for joining us. Really, really appreciate your time.
I really appreciate you having me on. Thanks, guys.
I wanted to you wrote a book, Burke's Law, A Life in Hockey. And I'm wondering, you've had such an illustrious life in this sport. Why did you finally decide, there you go, why did you finally decide to put pen to paper, as they say, and write a book?
Well, after we won the Cup in Anaheim in 2007, Stephen Brunt, who writes great sports book and wrote this one with me, asked me about doing a book, and I said I had too much hockey left in front of me. But I started taking notes, thinking there would be a book here someday. So my last year in Calgary, the late, great Ken King told me in February that I would not be coming back at the end of the year, and that was the deal we made. At the end of each year, we could each review it. And so I had a little more time on my hands, so I started doing an outline for the book and then turned it over to Stephen Brunt, and here we are.
Well, it's really a fascinating book. I mean, I have 3 pages of notes here of questions to ask you, and we only have limited time. But one thing that I know that Red Wing fans are very familiar with Igor Larionov, obviously the professor, the Russian Five. He began his career in Vancouver. I tell people all the time, I believe he's a living hero, actually. But you were pretty instrumental in getting him over to Vancouver and beginning his NHL career. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, the Russians had promised us, the Vancouver Canucks owners, Mr. and Mrs. Griffiths, had been promised the first Russian player would come to Vancouver. In fact, Sergei Pryakhin went to Calgary first, and then Larionov and Krutov came over. And I didn't, be honest with you, I didn't have that much to do with Igor coming over, but what a joy he was to have. I tell the story in the book. He made a play. He was looking down, battling for the puck behind the net. He's a left shot. He's battling with a much bigger defenseman. We had a guy, Jimmy Stanlak, come off the bench, and he made a tape-to-tape backhand pass without ever looking. And Pat and I looked at the tape afterwards, and we're like, he never looked. So I asked Igor, how did you spot House? Jimmy Stanlak's nickname was House. How did you spot House coming off the bench? He said, I looked in the glass. He saw the reflection in the glass and put a tape-to-tape pass on.
Wow.
And I thought, that's when we got someone special.
Well, yeah, what's interesting about that, and not jumping ahead about the Russian Five, but when Scotty decided to put them together, and actually I think it was Igor himself that said, maybe you've got 5 of us, let's see what we can do. Did you know that they would, quote-unquote, revolutionize the game?
Well, I went and watched the documentary, and no, I didn't. I didn't think they'd be as good as they were. I knew they'd be a problem for opposing teams, but they were better than I thought they'd be. And I think most people who say differently aren't telling the truth. The fact is they were special, and you don't see a lot of special hockey. We have a great league, but I don't use that term special very often. I reserve that for very few cases, and they were special.
When you look at the book, what do you hope that people take out of this book about you and about your life? I've seen so many reviews where they call you the most misunderstood guy in hockey, or a guy that's never really gotten his due. Do you look at it that way, or are you just very appreciative of the life you've been able to lead?
It's more the latter. Like, to me, and you know this, you know about me, I don't really care what many people think. The book isn't an attempt to make me look good. Number one about the book, I hope people who buy it enjoy it. It's not cheap to buy a book. Everyone who steps up and buys it, I hope they enjoy it. What they get from it, I hope, is an intimate look at how it is to be a GM, managing up with ownership, handling star players, handling coaches, handling the media, how difficult it is. And what I told Steve when I hired him is I said, I want people reading this book to feel like they're standing next to me on the draft floor when I do the deal for the Sedins, or sitting in my office when I do another trade. And I think he really captured that. So I hope you enjoy it. Hope you learn some things about running a team. There's some rules in there and some things that I live by that you might find interesting. But most of all, I hope you enjoy it.
Well, I wanted to get into the rules, but what I really like is where you break down almost the kind of a pyramid style, like the old John Wooden way of first line, second line, what you look for. And I know you've been very complimentary with the job Steve Yzerman has done since he's become general manager of the Detroit Red Wings. So keeping that in mind, I want to just very quickly, I don't want to give everything away and have you expound on it. I know people aren't listening to hear me speak, but your first line, one guy with size. Second line, two guys with size. Third line, you have size fighter and a disciple. Fourth is a great fighter and he disciples. 13th forward is a toughness. He can fight. And then your first pair defensemen are skill. Your second ones are size, and then one size, one fighter on the third pair. I guess that would be over years of putting teams together. And if it kind of looks like this is the way Steve wants to build these Red Wings. Can you expound a little bit on that?
Well, that's what you're referring to is the Anaheim model. You'd have to modify it now. That was a straight top 6, bottom 6 team, and a straight top 4, bottom 2D. And you'd have to modify that now to be a top 9, bottom 3. But I think you saw in the playoffs, it still is important that you can play physical hockey. And I think the biggest difference in the finals was that one team wasn't able to keep up physically. And so to me, I look at what Steve's done and I admire him greatly. And I think they're on the right track because I think they are putting together a blend of bite and skill. You still need bite. And God, I hope the day comes when we don't ever play a game where bite isn't necessary.
Well, when you look at the physical side, and obviously Detroit, going back to, even before the Bruce brothers, I mean, Gordie Howe was not exactly, a timid player, to say the least. I mean, it's always been appreciated in this city. I mean, you're an American, and you know that Detroit's always been kind of a gritty, blue-collar city, going even back to the old black and blue division in the NFL. I'm kind of curious, are you a little bit, disappointed that fighting or the toughness is being taken away from this game?
Yeah, I worry about it. So here's what I say to people. They say, "Oh, you're just a dinosaur." I don't want to go back to like when I played in the American League. We're a tail end of the Broad Street Bullies. I played for the Flyers farm team in Portland, Maine in the American League, and we had a really tough team. We were on the tail end of that. We had some nights 7, 8 fights. We had 3-hour games. We emptied the bench, I think, 6 or 8 times that year, including once in the Calder Cup semifinals, for God's sake. We had a bench clearing brawl. I don't want to go back to those days. But I worry, I see some nights where I see too much flag football. Too many games where there's not enough contact, not enough passion, not enough interest, not enough reaction. And I think we have to keep walking that tightrope. So the game has never been better than it's been now in terms of skill. And that's a good thing. I applaud that. But we can't get away from our roots. Our roots are, it's a full contact game. There's no out of bounds on a hockey rink. There's only 2 sports where there's no out of bounds, ring sports and hockey. Everywhere else, there's a place you can step and be safe. So we've got to keep that blue-collar element in our game. I think it's critical. I think fans everywhere like it, not just Detroit.
Right. No, certainly that's a great thing. I want to get into your 4 rules real quickly as we have time. Number 1, be the hardest working player on the ice. Be a coach's dream. I'm kind of paraphrasing these, obviously. Be a great teammate and play hockey with fearlessness. I mean, is that a tough sell? I mean, when you address a team, when you're in charge of a team, do you lay these rules out? Is this the edict that you want all your teams to play by?
No, those were my 4 rules. I didn't start playing hockey till I moved to Minnesota when I was 12, or I turned 13. So I started playing hockey at 13. And anyone in Detroit knows you're never going to make it if you start that late. So I came up with these 4 rules for myself, and I would encourage young hockey players, boys and girls. These are 4 useful rules. Number 1. Be the hardest worker on the ice, practice and games. I don't like guys who just work in games.
Right.
2, be a coach's dream. So I was always in position. I'd always play the last minute of every period. I killed penalties. And I was never out of position where the coach could stop the film and say, "Burke, why are you over here?" So the coach knows he can rely on you. Number 3, be an indispensable teammate. Look after your teammates. If one of them looks down, say, "Hey, what's up? How can I help?" Take the freshman out for dinner. Do the right things. And 4th was, play hard. And that included, in my case, playing tough. But anyone who plays hard, that carries a premium. That carries a premium at any level. College hockey, junior hockey, pro hockey. So any young player, read those 4 rules. And by the way, this is not a kid's book, but read those 4 rules. And if you follow them, they'll take you pretty far.
right now, it appears that there's a season going to happen. I think everyone's looking forward to it. It's still in discussion. Anytime I hear labor strife and owners and players and all that, I get a little bit giddy because this league is, you know as well as anybody, it shut itself down for a year. They've had all kinds of labor difficulties with lockouts. Where do you think we are as far as that?
Well, I think you're talking about, this is a once-in-a-lifetime occurrence, hopefully. It was 100 years ago was the last time we had a pandemic of this size. And we're adjusting on the fly. And this requires creativity and flexibility on both sides. And the fact is, and the NHL and NFL and NBA and Major League Baseball are going to have to deal with this now. What's it going to look like going forward? And they're 50-50 partners, the NHL and the NHLPA.
Right.
So they struck a deal based on what they thought the facts were back in August or whenever they did the deal to come back to the bubbles. Now it's a totally different landscape. There's not a vaccine. There's not going to be full crowds. There's not going to be any fans in some buildings. Unless local authorities allow socially distanced attendance, there won't be any fans. So the owners are taking a massive hit. The players own half of that. So they're going to have to be creative and figure out a way to play these games. We have to play. And my message to the players would be, I said at the time, and one of the things I feel is we've been good at Sportsnet about calling these issues out in real time.
Right.
I said when they shut down, it would be a flat cap for 5 years. Everyone says, no, 2. It's going to be flat for 5 years.
Right.
The revenues are not rebounding here quickly enough. It's not possible to happen. And so I said at the time, look for a 40% rollback in player salaries. And it looks like that's what they're going to get to play if they play. Now, I'd say to players, 60% of what you're making is better than 0% of what you're making. Teams will actually lose less money if they don't play, but we have to play. They've got to find a solution here.
Well, I hope they do, and I hope it. It happens very, very soon. I certainly, even though the Red Wings are in a rebuilding mode right now, you know as well as anybody.
Listen, I got news for you. If you're a Detroit fan, there's a lot of good news in Detroit. Like Steve Yzerman is doing a marvelous job rebuilding things. They're way ahead of where they were. They're way ahead of where people thought they would be. I love the patience with the coach. I think Jeff Blashill's a really good coach, and I don't think he deserves to get replaced unless and until he has enough talent to win and can't. He hasn't had that opportunity. I love the patience with the coach. The moves they've made, the draft picks, they're going to be just fine.
Steve Yzerman gets it. He's always gotten it, whether he was a player or an executive. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think the Red Wings are in great hands with Steve Yzerman calling the shots.
Well, if you look at Tampa Bay's championship team, and Julien Brisebois addressed some very specific needs and deserves a lot of credit, but the guts of that team was put together by Steve Yzerman. I generally think average players make better coaches and better GMs because they have to know the game better. A lot of great players get by on instinct alone. A lot of great players don't want the tension and pressure that comes with it. A lot of great players have enough money. They don't need the aggravation. And that's why a lot of great players don't get into management. But Stevie, I remember when he was working for Tampa, it's like his first or second year out. And I bumped into him in a minor league game somewhere. I forget where we were. I want to say Milwaukee maybe. But I saw him somewhere, and he walked over to me and goes, I had no idea how hard you guys worked. The players, they think everyone just shows up and plays, right? But He worked at it. He's done a great job, and Detroit will be back where they want to be real soon.
Unfortunately, we have run out of time. Burke's Law, A Life in Hockey, a great read. This time of year with the holidays coming, it would be perfect gift for any hockey fan. I've admired you a long time, Brian.
Anyone over 18.
Oh, 18, right. Remember, he has stressed it already. It is not a children's book.
There's a lot of inappropriate language in there.
Okay, well, hey, it's right up my alley. I still read Ball 4 at least once a year. So I'm kind of used to that. Brian Burke, thank you so very much. I really enjoy your work on Sportsnet. You've been really just a great ambassador for this game for many, many years. Nothing but success, and thank you for joining us today on The Headliner.
My pleasure for joining you. Thanks for having me on.
All right, that'll do it for this edition of The Headliner presented by Miller Lite. Miller Lite, the original light beer. It's only 96 calories. It tastes great, and it is available for delivery. Daniela, back to you.